Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Right, we've got two bits of good news and a bit of bad news. Which ones do you want?
So the bad news.
Well, the bad news, you know the bad news. Bad news is you're an idiot, Lee, and it turns out that you told us the wrong match. We were all set to go here with the final, which is what we were going to do anyway, but then I realised minutes before we went on air that actually we should have been recording the semi-final. So we're recording this out of order because we're ready to record the final. You'll listen to semi-final first because we're going to record that next and release it first with magic and technology. But anyway, it leaves. If you think it's shit, that's entirely Lee's fault. Do you want the two bits of good news?
I thought the whole point of now doing the final now was so that we didn't have to admit that we got it the wrong way around.
We just need to protect ourselves in any way possible. So any possible reason we can give for the whole thing being shit, and the more I can deflect that to you, the better. I think we know this to be true. Well, two bits of good news is firstly, I just realised the second I pressed record a second ago, then realised I hadn't done sound share, so I wouldn't have had the intro at the start. I remembered, and I have, so that's good. And also, I listened back to last week's podcast, and I mentioned about how Zoom now has it so that when you press record, it goes, this meeting is being recorded. And I thought that was going to be on the start of the podcast, but it wasn't. It doesn't save that bit, which is pretty clever, isn't it?
Happy days.
So it was only quality from start to finish, that podcast. There was no less good bits like that.
Fantastic. That is good news.
That is good news. Yeah, we need some good news because we're recording this the day after England lost the final of the Euros, which Lee's particularly, it looks a bit glum. You going to be okay?
We'll be fine.
He cracked a smile there. Okay, so this is the final. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference what order we record these in because there's no real continuity between them anyway. So the final is from a random episode of Raw in 2002, but it is, on the face of it, a massive matchup. It's two of the biggest stars of their respective generations. Arguably, I mean, like Flair, you could only really put second to Hogan, and even then, they're a different style. Like Hogan was a bigger star, but Flair was the wrestler of the 80s. Yeah. You can make a very strong case for Lesnar being the wrestler of the last decade.
Yeah.
So it's a big final. It's just because they're different generations. The only time they did wrestle one-on-one was a random episode of Raw, which we've got up now. It's July the 1st, 2002. Seemingly, Lesnar and Heyman have issued an open challenge, which has been answered by Ric Flair, who, I mean, he's not young, but he's not mega old there. I'm sure he can still go to some degree. So anyone who's watching it, we're on the network, July the 1st, 2002. 10 minutes, 10 seconds into the episode, pressing play in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so Flair's got, that's quite a nice robe, that one. It's not the best robe I've ever seen, but it's still pretty swish, isn't it?
That's so cool, isn't it? But yeah, 2002, it's when you say it feels quite recent, but then you have to remember yourself, it's 20 years ago. 20
years. I mean, like, if you go back the same distance again from pre to that, you're looking at 1983. So Lesnar's a small child. Flair's probably only in his second world title reign. Yeah, it's mad to think that that's the difference in... So is Lesnar about... I think he's a couple of years older than us, who literally would have been a 5-year-old in 1983.
Yeah.
Crazy.
How long's Lesnar been in WWE at this point?
24, 25. I feel he was 25 when he won the title from Brock, which would be SummerSlam only 2 months later than this. Depending on when his birthday is, it's got to be 24 or 25. I think he's 3 years older than us. Yeah, that'll be right, yeah.
No, sorry. So how long has he been wrestling here in WWE?
In WWE, just a few months. So he debuted the night after WrestleMania, came out and destroyed Spike Dudley, I think it was Matt Hardy and a few others. So that would have been roughly April the 1st-ish. So this is, so 3 months-ish later. Okay, so what interesting facts you've got for me, or questions, because that's why we couldn't really quickly switch to the other match, because Lee spent so long researching this one that we would have had to delay it by too long to skip straight to the other match.
Yeah, with a whole 3.5 minutes of searching and printing.
Yeah, well, that's and that's a lot of work. That's a day's work for you, isn't it? Do you print stuff? Can you email it to yourself?
Yeah, it's pretty much the only time I print. So today's Today's questions for you, John,
Go on.
are all based on incoming and outgoing champions of the year 2002.
Because 2002 was a big year. It's definitely an end of a 90s era. There's a lot of guys still around, big stars like Hall, Nash, etc. Not that much in the tail end of the career, and then a lot of new blood coming in like Lesnar, Orton, etc. So it's a good year for such questions. What have you got?
All right, so we'll start with the, I think it started the year known as the Undisputed WWF Championship.
Yeah.
2002, can you tell me who was the incoming champion? Obviously, it changed title 3 times. So who started the year as champion and who ended the year?
I could probably run through them all in order. Well, there was Jericho started the year. He unified the titles at Vengeance 2001, beating The Rock and Steve Austin on the same night. He then loses it to Triple H at WrestleMania 18, who loses the next month to Hogan at Backlash, who loses it the next month to Undertaker at whatever that pay-per-view was called. Now, Taker there. Oh, no, hang on. No, that's right. So who does Taker lose it to? 2002. The Rock. He drops it to The Rock to set up the match with Lesnar at SummerSlam. Lesnar wins the title and is the last undisputed champion because he then becomes the exclusive property of, I think it would have been SmackDown. Yeah. And Paul Heyman brings out the big gold belt and names Triple H the World Heavyweight Champion. So that at that point, there's no longer an undisputed champion. There is a World Heavyweight Champion and a WWE Champion. So 2002, Lesnar drops it to Big Show at Survivor Series. When does Big Show drop it to Angle? I think that will be the following month. I think Angle would end up the year with the WWE title. And then the WWF one, Triple H drops it to Shawn Michaels at Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series, regains it the following months to Triple H and Angle of it too.
Yeah.
Yes, don't ask me what happened in wrestling for the last 10 years, but 20 years ago, easy.
Across the board as well.
Oh, look at that. Oh, tick, 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 tick.
I wasn't even going to ask you for the in-between bits, because I thought that's ridiculous, but that's incredible. Well done.
What was it we were talking about with our friend, well, I say friend, it's this guy that we feel sorry for, the guy with the tartan skirt, you remember Jamie, yeah?
Oh, the Scottish Yank.
Well, kind of. I mean, he's English. Well, he was English yesterday. Is he still English now? We've lost in the Euros, or has he gone back to being a Scottish Yank?
Well, I noticed he put a sad face and an England flag as a status this morning, so
he hates England again?
Or he's suggesting he's sad because he's English and England lost.
Well, anyway, so Jamie, what we were talking about, I think, was his knowledge of cars, I think, wasn't it? Because you two were talking about the new car that Jamie's got, and none of that means anything to me. But as I said in there, asking me about 20, 30-year-old wrestling, I don't know everything. And it's not even a conscious effort. It's a bit like, I don't know, I watched Simpsons a lot in the 90s, and for whatever reason, it's all just stuck in my head. It's not like I particularly sat down and tried to remember these things. I think with wrestling particularly, it's because there's always context there, if you know what I mean. Yeah. You can piece it back together more than you can perhaps some other things. But then I know other people feel the same way about football. I know people who can, and perhaps you can name results of pretty much every match they've ever watched and players and all sorts of information that wouldn't stick with me.
It's funny because kind of mid to late 90s, I could probably tell you a lot of individual United results and what happened in the various trophies and what have you.
Yeah.
But then kind of since then, I probably couldn't tell you any individual results from last year, so I don't know what's happened there. And then with the wrestling, I've got a similar encyclopedic knowledge to you for wrestling, but only from, I'd say, probably a 3-year period of probably 1990 to 1993.
Oh, Flair, the dirtiest player in the game there with a low blow on Lesnar. I think wrestling does lend itself, because to me there's so much, again, context in there almost. You can figure it out from people coming and going, whereas to me football's a little bit more, not samey, but
yeah,
to me it just doesn't quite stick out in the same way. Even if I was a massive fan and watched all the games, I don't know if I'd remember it in quite the same way.
No, I don't think you'd remember. You don't necessarily remember all the matches because the individual matches, I suppose, aren't massive. It's not like I suppose a championship here changing hands is like an FA Cup final, which you would remember.
Yeah. So Lesnar's actually going to Flair's going to town on Lesnar now. Gave him the low blow, the chop block, and he's got the figure 4 on him. He's teaching the moves boss. Heyman's coming in for the save.
I don't know who wins this, by the way.
I do.
Well, I know you do. I'm
Yeah.
assuming Lesnar wins because he's the incoming.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't actually know what happens at the end. I'm assuming Lesnar's possibly about to go over clean with the F5. He's got Flair up, and we may have just ended the match already. Oh, yeah, that's it. Got to be it, surely. That's it. Yeah, Flair's been pinned with the F5. So that was back when people used to take the F5 lying face down. You notice the way Flair landed there?
Yeah.
He landed flat, which to me, that's how you should take that move because that's very much how he puts you into it. If I remember correctly, Big Show was the first one who started taking it on his side, which is understandable because he's a big lad. Probably hurt quite a lot landing face down, but he started taking it like rolling onto his side, and ever since, that's how the majority of people have taken it. Around about this time as well, Hogan put Lesnar over big time. Like, to say it's Hogan, who generally doesn't like putting people over, he put Lesnar over clean, and Lesnar, I think he bloodied him up, and then he passed out to the bear hug, which is quite a strong putting over from someone like Hogan, who's probably lost clean, 2-3 times in his entire career at that point.
Yeah.
Lost to the Warrior in 1990 clean. Other than that, struggling to think of anything that he's ever lost clean.
Well, even then, when you say clean, I mean there was still a bit of controversy with the Warrior, weren't it, when the ref was down for a while.
True, yeah. Hogan got his visual pinfall, as they call it, but I would call that clean. There was no outside interference. There was no dodgy referees. It was considered a passing of the guard type moment. Right, okay, the match is finished. That actually means that Lesnar is the winner of the tournament, which is, in theory, the important part of this whole thing. I presume you've still got some more questions for me, though?
Yeah, a worthy winner, we should say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's fair. If we'd known right at the start that Lesnar was going to win, then that seems fair.
Well, and also I think if you genuinely put together a tournament of wrestlers and they all fought each other in a knockout style, I think Lesnar would be one of the favourites.
He would do. I don't know how he'd last across numerous matches, though, because he does look like he's about to die after about 5 minutes of a normal match. So if he had to do 3 or 4 matches in an evening, he won King of the Ring that year. That must have been, 2 or 3 matches in the same evening. But 2 or 3 matches against big names like that, he might just have a heart attack. And like someone like Flair, the 60-minute man, the Iron Man, might have outlasted him in reality.
Do you want to try and navigate with the other belts then?
Oh, this will be a lot more difficult. So what are we doing, Intercontinental next?
Yeah.
So 2002. So, right, the US and Intercontinental title were unified at, I think it would have been Survivor Series, 2001. So I think that would have been Edge and Test. So Edge is definitely the champion coming out of Survivor Series 2001. So I'm going to say Edge starting the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. End of 2002. So who's come in there? Orton's in, but that's before he becomes Intercontinental Champion. That's late 2003. Jericho drops down the card at some point. Would he have gone down that quickly? I'm going to go Jericho.
So Jericho took it when it became exclusive to Raw. Jericho took it, but then dropped it to Kane Monday Night Raw.
Oh, he gets unified. There is no Intercontinental Championship at the end of 2002.
Yeah,
Kane and Triple H unify it on Raw.
That's right.
Okay, trick question.
Well, Triple H, you could say, was officially lost.
They went through a mass cleaning up of belts over there. So going from, 2001, you've got all the WCW and WWF belts. They bit by bit unify them, so they get rid of the US title. Then later on, the Intercontinental Champion. There's a hardcore title going in 2002. I think that gets unified with the European, and then that gets unified with the Intercontinental before that's unified with the World. So you're left at the end of 2002 with you've got your 2 world champions. I don't even know if you've got 2 tag champions at that point. If you've only got 1, I think you might only have
World
2. Yeah, World Tag Team Champions, the 2 world champions, and presumably 1 women's champion, which must be the fewest belts that had there at any point in the last 20 odd years.
Yeah.
Seems a bit random not having a secondary belt. I know you've got 2 world titles, but if you don't have a secondary belt, that almost by default makes one of the world titles the secondary belt.
Yeah. Because I always kind of looked at the Intercontinentals kind of like middleweight.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to go at Cruiserweight Championship?
Oh, I've really not got a clue, but let's think about, again, time frames. Is that still active at the end of 2002, or has that been unified? I think that's probably still active because it's around in the years afterwards. So Mysterio doesn't come in until SummerSlam 2002, and even then he's not hanging out with the Cruiserweights for a while. Matt Hardy at some point that year?
No.
No. Might be struggling here. 2001 to Cruiserweights. I'm going to have to pass on that.
So the incoming champion was Tajiri.
Okay. Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, it was Billy Kidman.
Kidman, right? Okay. You know what the best thing Kidman ever did?
He took it from Jamie Noble.
Do you know what the best thing Kidman ever did?
What?
Kidman, the best thing he ever did.
Go on.
He married Tori Wilson. Have you seen Tori Wilson?
Yeah. Has this come up before?
Possibly. I'm still angry about the whole thing that Kidman married Tori Wilson. I wanted to marry Tori Wilson. It's not fair. What's Kidman got that I've not got? That I have. Well, you know what I mean. He's got a good...
Speaking of women.
Women's Championship?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm just going to go with Lita and Trish Stratus.
Trish Stratus was the incoming champion.
Okay.
And
Victoria? Oh, yeah, that was going to be my third guess, Victoria. Yeah.
Trish Stratus held it 3 times. There was only 6. It only changed hands 5 times, and Trish held it 3 times.
It alternated between her and someone else, did it, essentially?
No, there was Jazz, Molly Holly, and Victoria in between.
I meant as in her, somebody else, her, a different somebody else, her, a different somebody else. Yeah. She was very much the backbone of the women's division around that time.
The European Championship?
Well, again, by the end of the year, it's gone. It's been unified. So coming into 2002, I'm going to say Al Snow.
No.
No? Pass.
Christian.
Okay, right, fair enough. I know Al Snow held it roughly around there towards the end of its lifetime. So I remember him doing this gimmick where he was dressed up as a member of a different European nation every week. That would have been roughly then, but yeah, Christian, fair enough. Do you know what Vince McMahon suggested for a gimmick for Christian?
Again?
Do you know what Vince McMahon suggested for a gimmick for Christian?
Go on.
So he doesn't like the way Christian looks. He doesn't like his face. I think particularly his like pointiness of his face. And there was a trial I'm guessing it must have been the early 90s. I think it was one of the Kennedy family, maybe some son, grandson, cousin of the Kennedy family who was trialed. I think it was for rape, but don't quote me on that. And to protect his identity, they put a blue dot over his face while he was on trial. And Vince wanted to put a blue dot over Christian's face while he wrestled because he didn't like the way he looked. But imagine being Christian and being like, okay, thanks, Vince. I don't really know how it's going to get me over. I don't know. It doesn't suggest a confidence I'm going to be a world champion anytime soon.
That's brilliant. Right, okay. Tag teams?
Oh, goodness me. So, 2002 tag teams. You've definitely got Billy and Chuck at some point there.
They held it twice in the year. They didn't start or end the year.
Okay. So, okay. Hogan and Edge held it in the middle of the year. Who might have started it around then? Who could Billy and Chuck have beat or lost to? APA? Acolytes?
No.
Would you still have had New Age Outlaws around that time?
No.
X-Pac and Kane?
No.
Give up.
The incoming champions were the Dudley Boys.
Okay.
And I'll see if you get it with this clue. So the outgoing champions, they won it in a 4-way tag elimination match at Armageddon. Does that help?
Batista and Flair.
Booker T and Goldust.
Yeah. Batista and Flair was the following year in a similar sort of match. Yeah, Booker T and Goldust, fair enough. I struggle a lot more with that because firstly, there's so many changes anyway, and it just doesn't mean anything. I think it's only the world title that I could probably name the lineage of. If I could do the world title from 1963 right through, I'd probably struggle the last 10 years, I reckon.
And the WWE Tag Team Championship was created that year.
Okay.
Must have been when they split brands, and Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit were the first champions, and then they
were the first. Yeah, on SmackDown they had the SmackDown Super Six. They had a feud which was Benoit and Angle versus Los Guerreros versus Edge and Rey Mysterio. Yeah, I remember there was a thing to crown the new SmackDown or whatever they called them, tag team champions.
Those three teams you just mentioned were the three teams that held it throughout the year. Because Angle and Benoit dropped to Edge and Rey Mysterio at SmackDown, and then they dropped it to Los Guerreros and Survivor Series.
Mm-hmm. So who finished it as? So Angle and Benoit finished as?
No.
Oh, you just saying? They finished the year as champions.
Yeah. And then there's one here called the, which I'm assuming, looking at it, because there's pages and pages, was like, what, maybe the 24/7?
Hardcore. The hardcore title. You never heard of the hardcore title before?
No.
Oh, the hardcore title was ace. I mean, yeah, similar sort of concept to the 24/7 title. So that came into being in late '98. Mick Foley as Mankind was given it by Vince. It was a smashed up old world title belt. I can't remember where it came from. It was a title belt had been smashed up with a hammer by someone in the storyline, and Vince put some tape on it or whatever and gave it to Mankind to make him the hardcore champion, I think, as a way to try and keep him away from The Rock, to say, you've got this now, you don't need to be doing anything else. And over the next few years, it was great fun. I remember being in a university in the first year, we had a hardcore title there. You'd be having lunch and someone would smack you around the back head with a tray and pin you. Brilliant.
Coming out, going.
Okay, so Raven had a lot of them title reigns, as did probably Rhino.
It was actually retired at the end of this year.
Rob Van Dam, the last one.
Yeah.
Not Raven or Rhino for the start of the year.
No. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
The Undertaker.
Okay. Yeah. I do remember he won it from Maven, if I remember correctly.
But yeah, the same names do appear. It's much like what's his face now with the 24/7.
R-Truth.
But particularly towards the end, the last few pages are pretty much made up of Tommy Dreamer, Stephen Richards, and Sean Stasiak.
Yeah.
Just keep swapping almost daily towards the end.
Right. So I did well with the world champion ones there, but not so good with the others. But to be fair, it was 20 years ago, and I probably couldn't have answered it then.
I was impressive though on the world champion.
Thanks. So the winner of the tournament and winner of season 2 of the greatest wrestling show ever is Brock Lesnar. We should have got him something and invited him on Zoom.
Still time.
Yeah. What could we get him? What do you think he'd like? Some sort of blood pressure medication?
Yeah, or like a bottle of Lucozade or something. What was the first season?
I think with Lesnar, when you take that much coke, Lucozade doesn't even touch the sides. Disclaimer: I'm not suggesting Lesnar takes coke. Imagine Lucozade or something like that. Honestly, he'd laugh at you.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Are we going to be back for season 3?
We'll need to work out what season 3
We've slowed down a lot in season 2. Season 1 was consistent every week, and then season 3, apparently you've got a job to do, which is disappointing. Apparently you value paying the bills more than you value doing a shitty podcast that no one listens to.
Yeah.
What could we do for season 3? We're not committing to it. Could it be some sort of tag team thing? Could it be a speciality match thing? Could it be the worst matches ever? Could it be just complete randoms? Could you draw?
I don't like the idea of worst matches ever, because we have got to sit and watch them.
Well, it's not like we watch these either, is it? I've no idea what happened in that match.
At least all the listeners at home are getting the benefit of just listening to us.
All the listeners.
Yeah.
They are, you're right. Yeah. Well, we're open to suggestion then, all the listeners. If you'd like to find our Facebook page, just search for the greatest wrestling show ever. I think we're on Twitter and I don't know, probably other stuff. The website. I think you can probably leave comments on the website. Make some suggestions as to what season 3 could be. Maybe tag team, maybe
greatest tag team ever.
Well, it could just be the greatest tag team show. Specialty matches. An entire show of specialty matches. Has to be a cage or a strap or something like that. I'll tell you what we could do. Have you ever heard of the spin the wheel, make the deal match?
No.
So in 1992, Jake Roberts came to WCW for a couple of months, and he had a match at Halloween Havoc versus Sting, and it was called Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal. You had a little laughing midget explaining the concept, obviously. You spin the wheel, and it ends up on a specialty match, and they had a coal miner's glove match. We could do the equivalent. You could do one of those virtual prize draw wheels online with all different specialty matches in, and then spin it, boom, see what we get, and then maybe go for it'd be relatively easy to find the highest rated of that match on cage matches or something like that.
There you go.
Done. That is season 3, unless someone thinks of a better idea in the next however long.
The greatest special match show ever.
Awesome.